After 30 years of wandering mountain trails with nothing but a worn backpack and fading memories, Marcus Holloway stands before the mansion that destroyed his life. The Gothic estate looms through twisted oak branches, its broken windows like dead eyes watching his return. Ivy crawls across crumbling stone walls, and the grand entrance where his family once welcomed guests now hangs askew on rusted hinges. This isn't just another ghost story about an abandoned house. This is about a man who fled from something so terrible that he chose homelessness over facing the truth. Marcus thought he had buried his past along with his family's secrets, but some foundations run deeper than memory. When he finally descends into that basement after 3 decades of running, he discovers that certain horrors don't die with time. What could be so terrifying that it drove a grown man to abandon wealth and wander the wilderness for 30 years? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus pushes through the rusted iron gate, its hinges screaming in protest after decades of neglect. The sound echoes across the overgrown courtyard like a death cry, and he pauses, his weathered hands trembling against the cold metal. 30 years ago, this gate had gleamed black as midnight, maintained by a staff of 12 who kept the Holloway estate pristine. Now rust bleeds down its ornate scrollwork like dried blood. The memory hits him with unexpected force. He was 8 years old, pressed against his bedroom window on the 3rd floor, watching his father's Bentley glide through this very gate. Edmund Holloway stepped out in his tailored wool coat, briefcase in hand, looking every inch the textile magnate who had built an empire from a single mill his grandfather left him. That was 1975. When the Holloway name still meant something in New England society. Marcus forces his legs to carry him forward along the cobblestone drive. Weeds push through the gaps between stones, and what was once manicured lawn now resembles a wild meadow. The fountain at the center of the circular drive sits dry and cracked, its cherub statues headless and moss-covered. He remembers summer afternoons when his mother Victoria would sit on its marble edge, reading letters from her correspondence with other society wives, while he and his sister Sarah played in the spray. The mansion rises before him like a Gothic cathedral, its 3 stories of grey stone, darkened by decades of weather and neglect. Gargoyles perch at the corners of the roofline, their faces worn smooth but still menacing. Tall windows, once bright with warm lamplight, now stare back at him empty and black. Many of the panes are shattered, and birds have built nests in the window boxes that once overflowed with his mother's prized roses. This house had been his universe once. Built in 1923 by his great-grandfather, it contained 42 rooms, including a library with first-edition classics, a ballroom where the family hosted charity galas, and a wine cellar that his father claimed held bottles worth more than most people's houses. The Holloways weren't just wealthy, they were old money, the kind of family that appeared in society pages and had their portraits painted by artists whose names carried weight. As he approaches the front entrance, Marcus catches his reflection in a broken window and barely recognizes himself. His face is weathered and lined, hair gone grey and wild from years of sleeping rough. His clothes are patched and faded, his boots held together with duct tape. The contrast with his childhood self is stark. He had been groomed to inherit this empire, educated at Phillips Exeter and Harvard, taught to carry himself with the quiet confidence that comes from generational wealth. But wealth meant nothing the night everything changed. October 13th, 1993. The date is burned into his memory like a brand. He was 26 then, fresh from completing his architecture degree, engaged to Eleanor Patterson, the senator's daughter. His future had been mapped out with the precision of a blueprint. Marriage to Eleanor, a position in his father's company, eventually taking over the family business. The American dream handed to him on a silver platter. The front door hangs open, one hinge broken, revealing darkness beyond. As he steps closer, something catches his eye in the entrance hall. a flash of white against the dusty marble floor. His breath catches as he recognizes what it is. His mother's pearl necklace, the one his father gave her for their 20th anniversary. The clasp is broken, pearls scattered across the floor like fallen tears. He kneels and picks up one of the pearls, rolling it between his fingers. It's still perfect, luminous and smooth despite the years. Victoria Holloway had worn this necklace to every important social function, and it had become as much a part of her elegant image as her perfect posture and gracious smile. She never took it off except to sleep. Finding it here, broken and abandoned, brings back that night with crushing clarity. The screaming that woke him, the sound of breaking glass, the metallic smell that he would later recognize as blood. He had stumbled downstairs in his pajamas to find chaos. Furniture overturned, pictures torn from walls. And in the center of it all, this necklace, scattered just as it is now. That was when he grabbed the basement key from his father's study and ran into the night without looking back, without calling police, without trying to understand what had happened. Coward's instinct had overtaken everything else, and he had been running ever since. Marcus steps over the scattered pearls and crosses the threshold into his childhood home. The entrance hall stretches before him, its black and white checkered marble floor dulled by 3 decades of dust and debris. A grand staircase curves upward to the second floor, its mahogany banister carved with intricate vine patterns that his great-grandfather had commissioned from Italian craftsmen. Sunlight filters through the broken transom window above the door, casting fractured patterns across the walls where family portraits once hung. The silence feels alive, pressing against his eardrums like water. Every step echoes in the cavernous space, accompanied by the soft crunch of glass and debris underfoot. He moves carefully, his eyes adjusting to the dim interior, taking inventory of the destruction. The crystal chandelier that once dominated the space now hangs by a single chain, its 1,000 pieces scattered across the floor like frozen tears. To his left, the formal dining room reveals itself through an archway. The massive oak table where his family shared Sunday dinners remains, though its surface is warped and stained. He can almost hear the ghost of conversation, the gentle clink of silver against china, his mother's laugh as she corrected his posture or reminded him to use the proper fork. Victoria Holloway had insisted on maintaining the old traditions, even as the world changed around them, moving deeper into the house. Marcus enters what was once the morning room, where his mother would take her coffee and read the society pages. The furniture is overturned and rotting, fabric hanging in tatters from the chairs and sofa. But what stops him cold is the sight of something that shouldn't still be here after all these years. A child's drawing, somehow preserved under a piece of fallen plaster. He kneels and carefully extracts the paper. It's one of Sarah's drawings, done in crayon when she was perhaps 7 years old. The image shows their family standing in front of the house, all stick figures with oversized smiles. There's Edmund in his dark suit, Victoria in her pearls, Marcus tall and lanky even in crayon form, and little Sarah herself, drawn with pigtails and a pink dress. At the bottom, in her careful child's handwriting, she had written, "My family is the best." The drawing trembles in his hands as memories flood back. Sarah had been 12 years younger than him, an unexpected late-in-life child that had brought such joy to their parents. Where Marcus had been serious and studious, Sarah was pure sunshine, always laughing, always finding wonder in the smallest things. She had followed him around the house like a devoted puppy, begging him to read to her or play games. He remembers teaching her to ride her bicycle on the circular drive, running alongside her as she wobbled and giggled. He remembers her excitement on Christmas morning, how she would wake the entire house at dawn, bouncing on his bed until he agreed to come downstairs with her. He remembers the way she would sneak into his room during thunderstorms, clutching her teddy bear, asking if she could sleep on his floor. The guilt hits him like a physical blow. When he fled that night, he had abandoned her, left her to whatever horror had torn through their home. He had been her big brother, her protector, And when she needed him most, he had run like a coward into the darkness. Marcus carefully folds the drawing and slips it into his jacket pocket. The weight of it feels heavier than it should, a tangible reminder of his failure. He forces himself to continue exploring, moving through rooms that once held such warmth and life. The library, where his father would retreat after dinner to read financial reports and conduct business calls. The music room, where Sarah had taken piano lessons every Tuesday afternoon. Each room tells the same story of violence and abandonment. Furniture destroyed, personal belongings scattered, windows broken from the inside as if something had tried desperately to escape. The wallpaper peels in long strips, and water damage has stained the ceilings where pipes burst years ago. Nature has begun to reclaim the space, with vines creeping through the broken windows and moss growing in the corners where moisture collects. As he makes his way toward the back of the house, a sound stops him cold. It's barely audible, a soft shuffling that could be wind through the broken windows, or settling wood, or something else entirely. Something that doesn't belong in an empty house. Marcus holds his breath, straining to hear, but the sound doesn't repeat. Still, the sensation of being watched prickles at the back of his neck, and he finds himself glancing over his shoulder as shadows seem to shift in his peripheral vision. Marcus climbs the grand staircase, each step groaning under his weight after years of neglect. The mahogany banister feels rough beneath his palm, its once polished surface now weathered and splintered. Portraits of long-dead Holloways watch his ascent from gilded frames, their faces darkened by age and moisture damage until their expressions seem to shift in the dim light. The second-floor hallway stretches before him like a tunnel of memories. To his right lies his childhood bedroom. To his left, Sarah's room with its pale pink door, now hanging askew. But it's the door at the end of the hall that draws him forward. His father's study, the nerve center of the Holloway empire, where Edmund conducted the business that built their fortune. The study door stands open, revealing chaos within. Books are scattered across the Persian rug, their leather bindings cracked and pages yellowed. The massive oak desk, where his father once commanded respect from senators and business leaders, sits overturned, its drawers pulled out and contents spilled across the floor. But among the debris, something catches the light, the corner of a leather-bound journal, partially hidden beneath a fallen bookshelf. Marcus kneels and carefully extracts the volume. It's one of his father's business ledgers, the kind Edmund kept meticulous records in, documenting every transaction down to the penny. The leather cover is stained and warped, but the pages remain mostly legible. As Marcus opens it, his father's precise handwriting emerges from the yellowed pages like a voice from the grave. The early entries are mundane: shipments of cotton, meetings with textile buyers, discussions of labor costs. But as Marcus flips through the pages, the entries begin to change. References to special investors and private consultations become more frequent. Then in July of 1985, an entry that makes his blood run cold. Specimen number 3 delivered successfully. Client extremely satisfied with modifications. Payment received in full. Marcus reads the entry again, certain he's misunderstood. But the words remain the same, written in his father's unmistakable hand. He flips forward, finding more entries that chill him to the bone. Subject responds well to consciousness enhancement procedures. New. Delivery scheduled for October. Client requests younger. Specimens. Investment group pleased with quarterly results. The pages reveal a business that had nothing to do with textiles. Names appear regularly. Dr. Whitmore, Senator Patterson, Judge Blackwood, all pillars of New England society, all apparently involved in some horrific enterprise. The amounts of money mentioned are staggering, far exceeding what the textile mills could generate. Marcus realizes that the wealth he grew up with, the privilege he enjoyed, came from something unspeakable. His hands shake as he continues reading. The entries become more detailed, more clinical. Descriptions of subjects being transported, procedures being performed, modifications being tested. The language is cold and detached, as if his father was writing about livestock rather than human beings. But the final entries, dated just days before October 13th, 1993, reveal a different tone entirely. Victoria knows. Threatened to expose everything if we don't cease operations immediately. Showed her the basement. Mistake. She's lost her mind, keeps screaming about the children. Can't let her destroy what we've built. Meeting with investors tomorrow night. They're growing impatient with Victoria's threats. Blackwood suggests permanent solution. Can't risk exposure now, not when we're so close to breakthrough. Sarah asking too many questions about basement noises. Innocent curiosity or something more? Victoria may have told her. Can't take chances. The final entry is dated October 13th, 1993. Everything ends tonight. They're coming. Victoria left letters hidden. If found, we're all finished. Must protect the work. Future depends on maintaining secrecy. Marcus drops the journal as if it's on fire. The truth crashes over him like a cold wave. His father hadn't been a respectable businessman, but a monster involved in human experimentation. The investors weren't financing textiles, but funding torture. And his mother had discovered the truth, tried to expose it, and been murdered for her conscience. The sounds he heard in the basement as a child, the late-night meetings, the way certain guests would arrive after dark and leave before dawn. It all makes horrific sense now. The Holloway fortune was built on suffering, and when Victoria threatened to reveal the truth, they silenced her permanently. But who were they that were coming that final night? And what had happened to Sarah in all of this? Marcus thinks of his little sister's drawing, her innocent stick-figure family portrait, and realizes she had been living above a chamber of horrors without knowing it. The journal holds more secrets, but Marcus's hands are shaking too badly to continue reading. The weight of this knowledge threatens to crush him. Everything he thought he knew about his family, his childhood, his very identity, has been built on a foundation of lies and blood. Marcus sits in the ruins of his father's study, the journal's revelations echoing in his mind like hammer blows. His entire childhood, every memory of love and security, now feels tainted by the knowledge of what was happening beneath his feet. The house around him no longer seems like a home, but a mausoleum built on suffering. He reaches into his jacket pocket, his fingers finding the familiar weight that has traveled with him for 30 years. The basement key slides into his palm, its brass surface worn smooth by decades of nervous handling. Even now, in the dim light filtering through the broken windows, he can see the dark stains on the metal and the chain that holds it. Stains that he knows with horrible certainty are his father's blood. The memory comes back with crystalline clarity, as if 30 years of suppression suddenly crack open like a dam bursting. October 13th, 1993, 2:47 a.m. He remembers the exact time because he had looked at his bedside clock when the screaming started. At first, he thought it was Sarah having another nightmare, but the sound was wrong, too deep, too agonized. Too many voices screaming at once. He had crept from his room and down the hallway, his bare feet silent on the Persian runner. The sounds were coming from below, from the main floor, but underneath them was something else, a mechanical humming that seemed to rise from the very foundation of the house. As he reached the top of the grand staircase, he could see into the entrance hall, and what he saw there shattered his world. Bodies on the marble floor. His mother's pearl necklace scattered like stars across black and white tiles already slick with blood. Men in dark suits moving through the house with the efficiency of professionals searching for something. And in the center of it all, his father Edmund, very much alive but kneeling beside Victoria's still form. His shirt soaked red as he pressed something into her lifeless hand. Marcus had frozen at the top of the stairs, his young mind unable to process what he was seeing. His father looked up then, their eyes meeting across the carnage, and Edmund's face showed no surprise, only a terrible sadness. "I'm sorry, son," his father had whispered, loud enough to carry up the stairs. "This wasn't supposed to happen. They promised me you and Sarah would be safe." One of the men in suits had turned toward the staircase then, and Marcus saw his face clearly in the lamplight. Senator Patterson, Eleanor's father, the man who was supposed to become his father-in-law in 6 months. Patterson's face was cold and businesslike as he raised a pistol toward the stairs. "The boy's seen too much," he said simply, but Edmund had lunged forward, grabbing Patterson's arm. "No, the deal was my family stays safe. I've given you everything, the research, the subjects, the facility. You have what you need. Let them go." The struggle between the two men was brief but violent, ending when Edmund's own gun discharged into his chest. He fell backward, his eyes finding Marcus one last time as blood pooled beneath him. "Find the boy and the girl," Patterson had ordered the other men. "Clean this up. Make it look like they all disappeared together." That was when Marcus had run. Not down the stairs toward his dying father, not toward Sarah's room to protect his sister, but to his father's study, where he grabbed the first thing his panicked mind could focus on, the basement key that Edmund always kept in his desk drawer. The key that no one in the family was ever allowed to touch, that opened the door everyone was forbidden to approach. He had clutched that key like a talisman as he fled through his bedroom window and down the oak tree he used to climb as a child. He had run through the woods in his pajamas, barefoot and bleeding, until he reached the highway where a trucker picked him up and carried him far from the nightmare his life had become. For 30 years, he had carried this key, never understanding why he had grabbed it in that moment of terror. Now holding it in the ruins of his father's study, he finally understood. Some part of him had always known that the basement held the answers, that whatever evil his family was involved in lived in the darkness beneath the house. The key feels heavier in his palm than it should, as if it carries the weight of all the horrors it might unlock. Marcus knows that whatever waits behind that basement door has been waiting for him to return, waiting for 30 years for someone to finally bear witness to the truth. Marcus rises from the study floor on unsteady legs, the blood-stained key clutched in his fist. The weight of recovered memory presses down on him like a physical force, but beneath the crushing guilt and horror, something else emerges, a grim determination. He has spent 30 years running from this moment, but there can be no more running. The dead deserve their truth to be known. He makes his way downstairs, each step deliberate despite the tremor in his hands. The entrance hall looks different now, overlaid with the ghostly image of that terrible night. He can almost see the blood on the marble tiles, almost hear the echo of his mother's final scream. But he forces himself forward, toward the back of the house where a door has haunted his nightmares for 3 decades. The basement entrance sits beneath the main staircase, hidden in an alcove that most visitors would never notice. It's a simple oak door, painted black, and reinforced with iron bands that speak of an earlier, more fortress-like era. To most people, it would appear to be nothing more than storage space, or perhaps a wine cellar. But Marcus knows better. This door has been the source of every nightmare, every moment of inexplicable dread that has plagued his adult life. As he approaches, he notices something that makes his blood run cold. Fresh scratches mark the wood around the lock, deep gouges that could only have been made from the inside. Someone or something has been trying to claw their way out. The scratches are recent, the wood pale where it's been torn away, which means whatever is down there is still alive. Marcus stops before the door, his breathing shallow and rapid. The key in his hand seems to pulse with its own heartbeat, or perhaps that's just his blood thundering in his ears. He can hear something now, faint but unmistakable, a mechanical humming, the same sound that had underlain the screams on that terrible night. After 30 years of silence, the machinery is still running. The stone steps that lead down into darkness are carved with symbols that predate the house by centuries. Marcus had never noticed them as a child. Few people would look closely at basement steps, but now he sees them clearly. They're not decorative flourishes, but ancient markings, worn smooth by age, but still visible. Celtic spirals interweave with symbols he doesn't recognize, creating patterns that seem to shift and writhe in the shadows cast by the dim light from above. These symbols tell a story older than the Holloway family, older than the mansion itself. They speak of the land beneath the house, of something that existed here long before his great-grandfather built his Gothic monument to wealth and status. The markings seem to pulse with a life of their own, and Marcus realizes that his family hadn't chosen this location by accident. They had been drawn here, or perhaps summoned, by something that had been waiting in the dark for far longer than any human lifetime. The mechanical humming grows louder as he descends, accompanied now by other sounds that make his skin crawl, a rhythmic beeping like a heart monitor, the whisper of circulating air through filters, the soft splash of liquid moving through tubes. These are the sounds of life support systems, medical equipment running continuously for decades without maintenance. With each step, the temperature drops noticeably. His breath begins to mist in the frigid air, and frost forms on the stone walls, despite the fact that it's late summer above ground. The cold seems to emanate from the stone itself, as if the earth here has been frozen from within. The symbols carved into the steps grow more elaborate as he descends, and in the dancing shadows cast by his movement, they almost seem to be moving, rearranging themselves into new configurations. The humming is loud now, almost deafening in the confined space of the stairwell. But underneath it, Marcus can hear something else that stops him cold just steps from the bottom. Breathing. Not the mechanical rhythm of life support equipment, but the labored, painful respirations of something alive. Something that has been waiting in the dark for 30 years for someone to come home. Marcus grips the key so tightly that its edges cut into his palm, adding fresh blood to the stains that have marked it for 3 decades. Whatever waits at the bottom of these steps, whatever his father and his associates created in the darkness beneath the house, it knows he's coming. The breathing has changed, becoming more rapid, more excited. Something down there recognizes his footsteps, his scent, his presence. The last step looms before him, and beyond it, darkness that seems to swallow light itself. Marcus reaches the bottom of the steps and finds himself in a chamber that defies the mansion's architectural period. The basement extends far beyond what the house's footprint should allow, carved directly into the living rock beneath the foundation. Electric lights flicker overhead, powered by generators that have run continuously for decades, their mechanical drone now deafening in the enclosed space. The first thing that strikes him is the smell. Antiseptic and decay, mingling with something metallic that coats the back of his throat. Industrial air filtration systems work overtime to circulate the stagnant atmosphere, but they can't mask the underlying stench of human suffering that has soaked into the very stone. Along the far wall, a collection of Victorian-era medical equipment gleams under the harsh fluorescent lighting. Surgical tables with leather restraints, their surfaces stained dark with decades-old blood. Bone saws and scalpels arranged with military precision on wheeled carts. But it's the restraints that make Marcus's stomach lurch. Iron manacles bolted directly into the stone walls, worn smooth by countless hands that struggled against them. The equipment speaks of horrors from a bygone era, but the electronic monitoring devices scattered throughout the space are thoroughly modern. Heart monitors, brain scanners, intravenous drip systems, all humming with quiet efficiency. Someone has been maintaining this equipment, upgrading it, ensuring it continues to function long after the original operators should have died of old age. Marcus approaches one of the surgical tables, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The leather restraints are worn to softness by use, and he can see where fingernails have gouged desperate messages into the metal framework. Names, dates, pleas for help, scratched by people who knew they would never leave this place alive. Tell my mother I love her. Please God, let it end. My name is Jennifer Walsh. Remember me. The messages overlay each other in a palimpsest of desperation. Some so old the metal has begun to rust around the scratches. Others, recent enough that the metal still gleams where it was scraped away. This equipment has been used continuously, possibly daily, for generations. The scope of the horror begins to dawn on Marcus as he realizes this isn't the remnant of some historical atrocity, but an ongoing operation. Near the surgical tables, a bank of monitors displays vital signs from dozens of subjects. Most of the screens show flat lines, the electronic death songs of hearts that stopped beating long ago. But several screens pulse with the steady rhythm of life, green lines spiking with each heartbeat, each breath, each moment of continued existence for subjects who should have died decades ago. Marcus's attention is drawn to a particular restraint system that differs from the others. It's larger, more complex, with additional apparatus designed to immobilize not just limbs, but every part of a human body. Neural interface cables snake from the headrest, disappearing into junction boxes that feed into the monitoring systems. This isn't just medical equipment, it's designed to keep someone conscious and aware while completely helpless. Fresh blood stains the leather padding, so recent it hasn't yet dried to the brown of older stains. Someone was held here recently, possibly within days. The restraints are still warm to the touch, and the monitors connected to this station show the irregular patterns of someone in extreme distress, heart rate elevated, brain activity spiking in patterns consistent with terror and pain. Marcus backs away from the restraint table, his mind reeling. The journal upstairs had mentioned subjects and specimens, but seeing the physical reality of what those clinical terms meant is overwhelming. Real people were brought here, strapped to these tables, and subjected to experiments that defied every principle of human decency. But the most horrifying realization is that the equipment shows signs of recent use. The conspiracy that killed his family didn't end that night in 1993. It continued. Someone has been maintaining this facility, bringing new victims, continuing the work that his father and his associates began. But the most horrifying realization is that the equipment shows signs of recent use. The conspiracy that killed his family didn't end that night in 1993. It continued. Someone has been maintaining this facility, bringing new victims, continuing the work that his father and his associates began. A soft moan echoes from deeper in the basement, beyond the surgical area where the shadows grow thick. The sound is barely human, stretched thin by pain and desperation. Someone is alive down here, someone who has been waiting in the darkness for an eternity of suffering to end. Marcus follows the sound deeper into the basement, leaving the surgical bay behind. The mechanical humming grows louder, and new smells assault his senses. The sweet corruption of infected wounds, and the acrid bite of chemicals used to preserve tissue. Whatever lies ahead in the darkness has been kept alive far beyond any natural lifespan. Sustained by machines and medicines, in a mockery of life itself, Marcus moves deeper into the basement complex. Following the sound of labored breathing, the chamber opens into a larger space, and what he sees there stops him cold. Lining the walls are dozens of glass containers, each filled with yellowish formaldehyde that has clouded with age. Floating within these preservative solutions are human organs, perfectly maintained specimens that glow with an eerie phosphorescence under the fluorescent lights. The collection is vast and methodically organized. Hearts arranged by size and age, from infant to adult. Brains suspended in specialized chambers with electrodes still attached. Their neural pathways mapped with surgical precision. Kidneys, livers, lungs, each labeled with dates, subjects' numbers, and clinical observations written in multiple hands spanning decades. The labels read like a catalogue of human suffering. Subject 47, consciousness retention 72 hours post-extraction. Subject 112, neural activity sustained through artificial stimulation. Marcus approaches one of the larger containers, his reflection distorted in the curved glass. The brain inside is massive, swollen beyond normal human proportions, with additional neural tissue grafted onto the original structure. Electrodes pierce the tissue at dozens of points, and the monitoring equipment connected to the container shows active brain waves. This disembodied organ is still thinking, still aware, trapped in a chemical prison for what the label indicates has been 15 years. The sight is so grotesque that Marcus has to steady himself against a nearby wall. The implications hit him like physical blows. These aren't just preserved specimens, but living organs kept functional through artificial means. Each container represents a person who was systematically dismantled while alive, their consciousness maintained in isolation from their body as part of some incomprehensible experiment. Moving along the wall of horrors, Marcus finds organs that defy medical explanation, hearts with additional chambers grafted into their structure, lungs that have been modified to process substances no human lung was designed to handle, brains that have been surgically altered, with foreign tissue integrated into their structure in ways that should be impossible with any known medical technique. The preservation fluid in many containers bubbles with activity, suggesting ongoing biological processes that shouldn't exist in dead tissue. Some organs pulse with their own rhythm, supplied with nutrients through complex tube systems that snake across the ceiling like artificial arteries. The entire wall represents a perverse library of human anatomy, each specimen a chapter in a book of horrors that spans generations. Near the center of the collection, Marcus finds a container that makes his blood freeze. It's smaller than the others, designed for a child's organ, and the label bears a date from 1993. Subject S. Holloway, age 12. Preliminary extraction successful. Consciousness transfer pending secondary procedures. The brain inside is tiny, delicate, with the electrodes arranged in a pattern that suggests someone was trying to preserve not just neural function, but personality and memory. Marcus sinks to his knees before the container, his worst fears confirmed. This is what happened to Sarah. She hadn't been killed quickly like his parents, but taken alive for experimentation. His 12-year-old sister had been brought down here, strapped to those tables, and systematically dismantled while conscious and aware. The thought is so horrific that his mind almost rejects it entirely, but the evidence floats before him in its chemical bath, the brain of the little girl who used to climb into his bed during thunderstorms. The monitoring equipment shows weak but persistent neural activity, meaning some fragment of Sarah's consciousness has been trapped in this container for 30 years, aware but unable to communicate, unable to die, unable to escape. The container next to Sarah's holds an adult brain with a familiar label, Subject V, Holloway, consciousness preservation successful. Extracted memories intact for research purposes. His mother's brain, removed while she was still alive and aware. Preserved to study the neural patterns of maternal love and protective instinct. Marcus realizes that his family didn't simply disappear that night. They were harvested, reduced to component parts for experiments that treat human consciousness like a commodity to be extracted, studied, and preserved. The people he loved most in the world have been trapped in these glass prisons for 3 decades, aware but helpless, suffering in ways that no human should ever experience. The soft moan he heard earlier echoes again from the darkness beyond the specimen wall, and Marcus understands now that it isn't coming from mechanical equipment. Something human is still alive down here. Something that has maintained its physical form while enduring horrors that would drive any sane mind to shatter completely. Marcus forces himself away from the wall of horrors, his legs unsteady as he follows the sound deeper into the basement complex. The moaning grows louder, more distinct, revealing itself as unmistakably human despite its distorted quality. He enters a chamber that must extend far beneath the house's original foundation, carved from the living rock and reinforced with steel beams that speak of serious engineering. In the center of the space, illuminated by a circle of harsh surgical lights, he finds the source of the sound. A metal examination table holds what was once a human being, though the modifications make identification difficult. Life support equipment surrounds the table like electronic attendants, their screens showing vital signs that pulse with stubborn persistence despite the subject's condition. As Marcus approaches, he sees that the figure on the table is small, child-sized, though the surgical alterations make it impossible to determine age or even gender with certainty. Tubes snake from various points on the body, feeding nutrients and medications that have kept this person alive far beyond any natural lifespan. But it's what lies beside the table that stops Marcus's heart entirely. Partially hidden beneath a surgical cloth, he finds a small teddy bear. Its fur is matted with decades of handling, one eye missing, an arm torn and crudely sewn back together. But despite the damage and age, Marcus recognizes it immediately. Mr. Buttons, Sarah's constant companion since she was 3 years old. She had carried this bear everywhere, talked to it like a friend, insisted it sit at the dinner table during family meals. The bear is positioned carefully beside the examination table, as if someone had placed it there to provide comfort to the figure strapped down with medical restraints. Fresh tears stain its matted fur, suggesting that despite the horrific modifications, whatever remains of the person on this table still possesses enough humanity to weep. Marcus picks up the teddy bear with trembling hands. It's warm, recently handled, and he can smell the faint scent of antiseptic mixed with something else. The smell he remembers from Sarah's room. A combination of bubble bath and childhood innocence that no amount of medical horror can completely erase. The figure on the table turns its head toward him, and Marcus looks into eyes that he recognizes despite everything else that has been done to their owner. Sarah's eyes, still bright blue despite being sunken in a face that surgical modification has rendered almost unrecognizable. Her mouth has been altered to accommodate breathing apparatus, her limbs extended and reinforced with mechanical components. But those eyes are unmistakably his little sister's. She tries to speak, but the breathing apparatus makes coherent words impossible. Instead, she reaches out with one modified hand toward the teddy bear, her fingers moving with the desperate urgency of someone who has been waiting 30 years for this moment. Marcus places Mr. Buttons in her grasp, and she clutches it to her chest with a strength that suggests her modifications have enhanced rather than diminished. Her physical capabilities, the life support equipment around the table, tells the story of 3 decades of continuous medical intervention. Heart monitors show a pulse that's too fast, too irregular to be entirely human. Brain scanners display neural activity that spikes far beyond normal parameters, suggesting consciousness that has been artificially enhanced and sustained. IV drips feed a cocktail of chemicals that Marcus doesn't recognize. Their labels written in technical terminology that speaks of cutting-edge medical research. But it's the surgical scars that tell the true horror of Sarah's existence. Layer upon layer of precise incisions mark every part of her body, evidence of countless procedures performed over the years. Some scars are old and faded, others recent enough to still show the pink of healing tissue. Someone has been continuously experimenting on her, modifying her, using her as a test subject for procedures that push the boundaries of medical science. Sarah's eyes track his movement as he circles the table, and in them Marcus sees not just recognition, but a desperate intelligence that has survived every modification. Every procedure, every year of captivity. She has been aware through all of it, conscious and thinking while being systematically transformed into something that exists somewhere between human and machine. The teddy bear in her arms represents the last connection to the innocent child she once was, carefully preserved by someone who understood that even in the depths of this medical hell, a fragment of childhood comfort might be the only thing keeping her sanity intact. The tears on its fur suggest that despite everything done to her body, Sarah's capacity for emotion remains heartbreakingly human. Marcus kneels beside Sarah's table, his hand reaching out to touch her face before pulling back at the sight of the monitoring electrodes attached to her temples. She watches him with those familiar blue eyes, and he can see intelligence there, awareness that has somehow survived 3 decades of horror. The breathing apparatus prevents her from speaking, but her eyes communicate volumes, recognition, relief, and underneath it all, a plea that chills him to his core. Beyond Sarah's table, the chamber extends into darkness, where more equipment hums with electronic life. Marcus forces himself to investigate, though every instinct screams at him to flee. What he finds is a filing system that spans the entire back wall of the chamber, dozens of metal cabinets filled with manila folders. Each meticulously labeled and organized, the files represent a catalogue of human suffering that spans generations. Marcus pulls open the nearest drawer and finds folders dating back to the 1920s, shortly after his great-grandfather built the mansion. Each file contains detailed documentation of individual subjects, photographs, medical records, surgical notes, and most horrifically, psychological profiles that track the breakdown of human consciousness under extreme conditions. The early files are handwritten in the precise script of medical professionals from a bygone era. Subject 001, Irish immigrant male, age 23, preliminary consciousness extraction successful. Subject remained aware throughout procedure, despite complete physical paralysis. The clinical language makes the horror even more disturbing, reducing human agony to data points and observations. As Marcus moves through the files chronologically, he sees the evolution of the experiments. The 1930s files document attempts to preserve consciousness after death. The 1940s show collaboration with researchers whose names he recognizes from history books. Nazi scientists brought to America after the war, their expertise in human experimentation, finding new applications in the basement of his family home. The 1950s files reveal the true scope of the operation. Government involvement becomes apparent through official letterheads and classified stamps. The CIA, military intelligence, university research departments, all contributing to experiments designed to understand the fundamental nature of human consciousness and how it could be manipulated, extracted, and preserved. By the 1960s, the files show technological advances that allow for more sophisticated procedures. Brain mapping, chemical consciousness enhancement, surgical techniques that can keep subjects aware through procedures that should render them unconscious. The photographs become more disturbing as the decades progress, showing subjects whose modifications push the boundaries of what could still be considered human. Marcus finds a section dedicated specifically to children, and his hands shake as he opens the first folder. Subject C001, female, age 8, acquired through family services collaboration. Enhanced neuroplasticity allows for consciousness expansion procedures impossible in adult subjects. The clinical photograph shows a little girl strapped to the same type of table where Sarah now lies, her eyes wide with terror that no child should ever experience. The children's files are the most extensive, spanning decades of research into young minds that could be molded and modified more easily than adult consciousness. The photographs chronicle unspeakable transformations, children kept alive through procedures that extend their suffering across years of continuous experimentation. Near the end of the children's section, Marcus finds Sarah's file. It's thick with decades of documentation, surgical notes that detail every procedure performed on his sister since that night in 1993. The photographs chronicle her transformation from the 12-year-old girl he remembered into the modified being now lying on the table behind him. But it's the psychological evaluations that break his heart. Despite everything done to her body, the assessments show that Sarah's personality has remained remarkably intact. Her intelligence actually increased through the procedures, her memory enhanced to perfect recall. She remembers every detail of her childhood, every moment with her family, every day of the 30 years she spent in this basement hell. The most recent entry in her file is dated just 3 days ago. Subject S. Holloway continues to demonstrate remarkable psychological resilience. Consciousness expansion procedures have enhanced rather than diminished emotional capacity. Subject shows increased distress when discussing family members, suggesting enhanced empathy circuits. Recommend continued observation. Marcus realizes that Sarah hasn't just survived the experiments. She's been made more sensitive, more aware, more capable of suffering than any normal human. Every modification designed to enhance her consciousness has instead amplified her capacity for pain and longing. She remembers their childhood with perfect clarity while being unable to escape the nightmare her life has become. The files represent not just documentation, but a roadmap of human destruction. Each folder a life destroyed in the name of research that serves no purpose beyond satisfying the curiosity of monsters who have forgotten that their subjects were ever human. Marcus closes Sarah's file with hands that won't stop shaking and forces himself to continue exploring the chamber. In the deepest corner of the basement, he discovers another examination area that differs from the others. This space shows signs of a struggle, with overturned equipment and scorch marks on the walls that suggest some kind of violent confrontation. Among the debris, something glints in the harsh fluorescent light. Marcus kneels and carefully extracts a delicate piece of jewelry from beneath a fallen monitoring device. It's his mother's wedding ring, a platinum band set with a modest diamond that his father had given her in 1965. But the ring isn't simply lost. It's embedded in the concrete wall, as if it had been driven there with tremendous force. The wall around the ring shows cracks radiating outward from the impact point, and Marcus realizes that Victoria must have struck the wall with enough violence to drive the ring into the concrete. The thought of his elegant, soft-spoken mother fighting with such desperation that she damaged her own hand, trying to escape, fills him with a rage he's never experienced. Examining the area more closely, Marcus finds scratches in the concrete that spell out a message, carved with fingernails and possibly the ring itself. Government knows, tell the world. Basement files prove everything. The letters are uneven and desperate. Some scratched so deep that they've torn away chunks of concrete. Victoria had used her final moments not just to fight but to leave evidence that could expose the conspiracy. The message confirms what Marcus suspected from reading his father's journal. Victoria had discovered the truth about the basement experiments and threatened to expose them. But unlike Edmund's clinical documentation, this message shows the human cost of that discovery. His mother had fought like a cornered animal to leave some record of what she'd learned, even as her killers closed in. Near the embedded ring, Marcus finds more evidence of Victoria's final struggle. Bloodstains that have turned brown with age mark the wall where she fought. Fragments of torn fabric suggest her attackers had to physically drag her away from the wall after she finished her message. The scene tells a story of desperate courage. A woman who knew she was going to die, using her last moments to ensure her killers wouldn't escape. Justice, but there's something else embedded in the wall near the ring. A small metal key that Victoria had somehow managed to press into the concrete before her death. Marcus works it free with his fingernails, and when it comes loose, he sees it's different from the brass key he's carried for 30 years. This key is modern steel, precisely machined, with a number etched into its surface, 247. The number corresponds to one of the filing cabinets he passed earlier. Marcus returns to the wall of files, his heart pounding as he searches for cabinet 247. When he finds it, the key turns easily in the lock, revealing folders that are different from the others. These files are marked with government seals and classified stamps that indicate the highest levels of security clearance. The documents inside reveal the true scope of the conspiracy Victoria had discovered. The basement experiments weren't just funded by the government, they were directed by it. A classified program called Project Mindbridge had been using locations like the Holloway basement for decades, with the knowledge and approval of officials at the highest levels of government. The files contained correspondence between senators, intelligence directors, and military officials discussing the experiments as if they were routine budget items. They reference dozens of similar facilities across the country, each one hidden beneath the homes of wealthy families who provided cover for the operations in exchange for substantial financial compensation. Victoria's discovery hadn't just threatened to expose her husband's involvement, it had threatened to bring down a network of government officials, researchers, and collaborators whose careers depended on maintaining the secrecy of programs that violated every principle of human rights and medical ethics. The final document in the folder is a kill order, signed by someone whose name Marcus recognizes from newspaper headlines, a man who went on to become a presidential advisor. The order is clinical and precise. Subject V, Holloway has accessed classified documentation. Immediate termination authorized. Make it look like family disappearance. Preserve research materials. Marcus understands now why Victoria embedded her ring in the wall with such violence. She wasn't just fighting for her life. She was fighting against a system so corrupt and powerful that it could order the murder of an entire family to protect its secrets. Her embedded ring was both a weapon and a memorial. A testament to the courage of a woman who chose to fight, even when she knew the fight was hopeless. Marcus returns to Sarah's side, his mind reeling from the discovery of the government conspiracy. As he approaches her table, he notices something he hadn't seen before in his initial shock at finding her alive. The examination table itself is a masterpiece of horrific engineering, its design revealing the true purpose of the experiments conducted in this basement. The table is adjustable in ways that no normal medical equipment should be. Articulated sections can position a subject's body at impossible angles while maintaining life support connections. Neural interface ports are built directly into the headrest, allowing researchers to access a subject's consciousness while keeping them physically immobilized. But it's the restraint system that tells the most disturbing story. The restraints aren't designed to simply hold someone down. They're engineered to maintain precise positioning during procedures that could last for days or weeks. Circulation systems built into the padding prevent pressure sores during extended restraint. Waste management systems allow subjects to be kept immobilized indefinitely without requiring release for basic human needs. This table was designed to keep someone alive and conscious through procedures that normal medical equipment couldn't sustain. Sarah's eyes follow his examination of the restraints, and Marcus sees understanding there. She knows exactly what this equipment is capable of because she's experienced every feature firsthand for 30 years. The modifications to her body aren't random. Experiments but carefully planned enhancements designed to test the limits of human consciousness under extreme conditions. As Marcus studies the table's construction, he notices control panels built into its base that display readouts he doesn't understand. Neural activity graphs, consciousness stability measurements, pain threshold monitors, all tracking Sarah's mental state with scientific precision. The equipment doesn't just sustain her life, it quantifies her suffering and uses that data to calibrate the next round of procedures. One panel shows a particularly disturbing readout labeled Consciousness Expansion Index. The numbers indicate that Sarah's awareness has been artificially enhanced far beyond normal human parameters. Every sensation, every emotion, every memory has been amplified through chemical and surgical modification. She doesn't just remember their childhood, she experiences those memories with superhuman clarity while being unable to escape her current reality. The table's neural interface system shows constant activity, indicating ongoing experiments even now. Electrodes monitor every thought, every dream, every moment of mental activity. Sarah's consciousness has become a laboratory where researchers can observe the effects of enhanced awareness on human psychology. She's not just a test subject. She's a living window into the deepest mysteries of human consciousness. Marcus notices that some of the table's systems are designed for interaction rather than simple monitoring. Communication arrays that could allow researchers to speak directly to a subject's consciousness, bypassing normal sensory channels. Memory implantation devices that could insert false experiences directly into a subject's neural pathways. Systems designed to rewrite personality and identity at the most fundamental level. But what chills Marcus most is the evidence that the table has been recently used for procedures beyond Sarah's ongoing maintenance. Fresh calibration marks on the positioning systems suggest other subjects have been brought here within the last few weeks. Blood traces that don't match Sarah's medical records indicate that she's had company in her suffering. The table's computer systems maintain detailed logs of every procedure performed over the past 30 years. Thousands of entries documenting experiments that push the boundaries of medical ethics and human endurance. But the most recent entries show a disturbing escalation in the research program. References to consciousness transfer protocols and identity preservation matrices suggest the researchers have moved beyond simply studying consciousness to actively manipulating it. Sarah's case file shows that she's become the primary test subject for procedures designed to transfer consciousness between bodies. Her enhanced neural capacity makes her an ideal candidate for experiments that would destroy normal human minds. The researchers haven't just kept her alive. For 30 years, they've been preparing her for something even worse. The table's restraint systems show signs of struggle that predate Sarah's current positioning. Scratches in the metal suggest other subjects have fought against the bonds, their desperation leaving permanent marks in the steel. But the restraints have been continuously upgraded over the years, each modification designed to prevent escape while maintaining the subject's ability to experience fear and pain. Marcus realizes that this table represents the culmination of decades of research into human suffering. Every feature has been refined through trial and error, each improvement purchased with the agony of countless subjects who were strapped down and used as test subjects for procedures that would never be approved by any ethical medical board. Marcus follows the sound of labored breathing deeper into the basement complex, moving beyond Sarah's table into a section where the fluorescent lights flicker with electrical instability. The air grows thicker here, heavy with the smell of infected wounds and recycled oxygen that has been circulating for decades without proper filtration. In an alcove carved directly from the bedrock, he discovers the source of the breathing. What was once human lies on a crude metal platform, kept alive by an array of life support equipment that seems jerry-rigged compared to the sophisticated systems maintaining Sarah. This subject has been modified so extensively that determining its original gender or age is impossible. But the mutations follow a pattern that suggests decades of continuous experimentation. The being's respiratory system has been surgically altered to accommodate breathing apparatus that extends deep into its chest cavity. Mechanical pumps assist damaged lungs that should have failed years ago, while IV lines feed a constant stream of antibiotics and nutrients into veins that have been surgically reinforced to handle the constant chemical assault. But it's the neural modifications that make Marcus step back in horror. The subject's skull has been opened and expanded to accommodate additional brain tissue that appears to have been grafted from other sources. Electrodes pierce the exposed neural matter at dozens of points, monitoring brain activity that pulses with patterns far beyond normal human parameters. The expanded consciousness created by these modifications has left the subject aware of every moment of its suffering while being unable to communicate or escape. As Marcus approaches, the being's eyes track his movement with desperate intelligence. Its mouth opens and closes soundlessly, the vocal cords long since removed or damaged beyond function. But the eyes communicate everything: recognition, pleading, and a depth of suffering that no human should be capable of experiencing. Near the platform, Marcus notices something that makes his blood run cold. A small placard, similar to those found in museums, provides information about this particular experiment. The text is clinical and detached, Subject L089, modified human consciousness sustained for 47 years. Successful integration of foreign neural tissue allows for expanded awareness and enhanced memory retention. Consciousness enhancement factor, 340% above baseline human parameters. 47 years. This person has been kept alive and aware in this basement since 1976, experiencing every moment of pain and degradation with superhuman clarity. The consciousness enhancement means that every second of suffering has been amplified far beyond what a normal human mind could endure, yet the subject remains aware and functional despite decades of torture. The placard continues with observations that chill Marcus to his core. Subject demonstrates remarkable adaptation to enhanced consciousness protocols, maintains coherent thought patterns despite continuous pain stimulus. Memory retention perfect for all 17,155 days of captivity. Emotional responses intact, showing increased capacity for despair and longing. Marcus realizes that this being remembers every single day of its captivity with perfect clarity. Every procedure, every moment of pain, every hour of loneliness across 47 years of hell. The consciousness enhancement doesn't just make the suffering more intense, it ensures that nothing is ever forgotten, that every horror remains as fresh and vivid as the moment it occurred. The subject's eyes lock onto Marcus's face, and he sees recognition there that shouldn't be possible. This thing knows who he is, remembers him from before its transformation. As Marcus looks closer at the facial structure beneath the surgical modifications, he begins to see familiar features distorted by decades of surgical alteration. The realization hits him like a physical blow. This is Tommy Richardson, a boy from his neighborhood who went missing in 1976 when Marcus was 9 years old. Tommy had been Marcus's age, a friend who came over to play video games and ride bicycles around the estate grounds. The disappearance had been explained as a runaway situation, a troubled kid from a broken home who had simply vanished into the foster care system. But Tommy hadn't run away. He had been taken, brought to this basement, and transformed into a living laboratory for consciousness experimentation. For 47 years, he has been aware that he's Tommy Richardson, remembering his childhood, his family, his dreams, while being unable to escape the nightmare his life became. The subject tries to mouth words, and Marcus realizes it's attempting to say his name. Marcus. The lips form soundlessly over and over again, a desperate attempt at human connection from someone who has been denied basic humanity for nearly half a century. The recognition in those eyes is heartbreaking, not just of Marcus's face, but of the childhood friendship they shared before horror consumed Tommy's life. Marcus kneels beside Tommy's platform, his mind struggling to process the horror of seeing his childhood friend transformed into this grotesque experiment. As he searches for some way to communicate with the being that was once a laughing 9-year-old boy, Tommy's eyes shift toward a corner of the alcove where shadows hide something Marcus hadn't noticed before. Following Tommy's gaze, Marcus discovers a small metal box tucked behind the life support equipment. Inside, he finds a collection of personal letters, their edges yellowed with age, but the ink still legible. The top letter bears familiar handwriting, Eleanor's elegant script that he remembered from love notes she used to slip into his textbooks during college. The letter is addressed to Marcus but never sent, dated October 20th, 1993, a week after his family's murder. His hands tremble as he reads words that shatter another piece of his understanding of that terrible night. My dearest Marcus, I know you'll never read this, but I have to write it anyway. I can't live with what I've done, what I've allowed to happen to you and your family. By the time you fled that night, I had already signed the contract. They paid me $50,000 to leave you, to break our engagement, to make sure you had no support system when you returned. The letter continues with revelations that make Marcus sick to his stomach. Eleanor hadn't simply abandoned him after the tragedy, she had been paid to betray him before it happened. The conspiracy had been so thorough that they had eliminated his emotional support network in advance, ensuring he would have nowhere to turn when his world collapsed. They told me it was just a business arrangement, that your father had made some bad investments, and the family needed to be removed from their social circle quietly. They said you would be better off without the burden of the family shame. I believed them because the money meant I could pay for my mother's cancer treatment. I told myself I was saving her life. Marcus reads further, learning that Eleanor had been recruited months before the murders, her mother's medical bills used as leverage to ensure her cooperation. The $50,000 had been just the first payment. She had continued to receive money over the years to maintain her silence about the arrangement. I know now what really happened in your house that night. The newspapers called it a disappearance, but I've seen the government files. I know about the basement, about what your father was involved in, about what they did to your family. I've been living with this knowledge for 7 years, and it's destroying me. Every night I see your face when I told you I couldn't marry you, when I walked away while you were grieving. The letter reveals that Eleanor had eventually learned the truth about the experiments, about the government's involvement, about the real reason the Holloway family had to be eliminated. Her guilt over taking the money had led her to investigate, and what she discovered had haunted her for years. I tried to find you, Marcus. I hired private investigators, contacted homeless shelters, searched through missing persons reports. But you vanished completely, like you never existed. Part of me hoped you were dead, because at least then your suffering would be over. But another part of me prayed you were alive somewhere, maybe free from all of this horror. The most devastating revelation comes in the letter's final paragraphs. Eleanor hadn't just taken money to abandon Marcus. She had provided information about his habits, his emotional state, his likely reactions that helped the conspirators plan their approach. Her intimate knowledge of his psychology had been used against him, weaponized to ensure his complete isolation when the murders occurred. I know you'll never forgive me, and you shouldn't. I sold you and your family for money, and no amount of guilt can undo that betrayal. I'm telling you this not because I expect absolution, but because you deserve to know that every person you trusted, everyone you thought loved you, was part of the machinery that destroyed your life. The letter is signed with shaking handwriting that suggests Eleanor was crying as she wrote it. But there's more, a postscript that reveals why the letter was never sent. I was going to mail this, but they found out I was trying to contact you. Senator Patterson visited me last night with photos of you taken from a distance, proof that they've been watching you all these years. He made it clear that any attempt to contact you would result in your immediate death. So I'm keeping this letter as my confession, my admission of guilt. Maybe someday, if you ever return to look for answers, you'll find it and understand that at least one person involved in your destruction eventually developed a conscience. The box contains dozens of similar letters, all written but never sent, chronicling Eleanor's growing guilt and her desperate attempts to find some way to make amends for her betrayal. Marcus drops Eleanor's letters with hands that shake uncontrollably, the weight of betrayal adding to the mountain of horror he's already discovered. As he struggles to process this latest revelation, Tommy's eyes continue to track his movement, and Marcus realizes the mutilated being is trying to direct his attention to something else. Following Tommy's gaze, Marcus notices a filing cabinet he hadn't explored, tucked behind the life support equipment in the deepest corner of the alcove. The cabinet is different from the others, smaller, more secure, with a lock that requires not just a key, but a combination. But the lock has been damaged, as if someone had tried to break into it with crude tools. Marcus manages to force it open, revealing files that are unlike anything he's found so far. These documents are sealed in plastic, protected from the basement's moisture, and marked with security classifications that exceed even the government files he discovered earlier. The first document he extracts makes his world collapse entirely. It's a birth certificate, but not the one he's carried in his memory his entire life. This certificate shows Marcus Holloway, born March 15, 1967, but the parents listed aren't Edmund and Victoria Holloway. Instead, the document shows his real parents as Subject 23A and Subject 23B, experimental subjects who were part of the Consciousness Enhancement Program. Beneath the birth certificate, more documents tell a story that rewrites everything Marcus thought he knew about himself. Medical records showing his early development in the basement laboratory. Psychological evaluations tracking his responses to various stimuli. Surgical notes documenting procedures performed on him as an infant. Modifications designed to enhance his neural development while maintaining the appearance of normal human growth. Marcus finds photographs of himself as a child, but these aren't family snapshots. They're clinical documentation of his development, taken in sterile laboratory conditions. The photos show him at various ages, connected to monitoring equipment, his responses to different stimuli carefully recorded and analyzed. He wasn't Edmund and Victoria's son. He was their most successful experiment. The files reveal that his real parents had been subjects in the early consciousness enhancement trials. His biological father had been a homeless veteran whose disappearance went unnoticed. His mother, a runaway teenager with no family to search for her. They had been kept alive long enough to conceive a child under laboratory conditions, then used for further experimentation until their enhanced consciousness finally broke under the strain. Marcus learns that he was born in the basement where he now stands, delivered by the same doctors who would later experiment on Sarah and Tommy. His early years were spent in controlled conditions, his development monitored and modified through procedures that were designed to enhance his cognitive abilities while suppressing memories of his true origins. The adoption by Edmund and Victoria hadn't been a rescue, it had been a placement. The Holloways had been selected as ideal cover parents because of their social standing and their involvement in the research program. They had raised Marcus not as their son, but as a long-term experimental subject, monitoring his development and reporting to the researchers who continued to study him from a distance. The most devastating discovery comes in the form of brain scans taken throughout his childhood. The images show neural modifications that were performed while he was too young to remember, enhancements that explain his architectural abilities, his perfect spatial memory, his uncanny ability to visualize complex structures. His talents weren't natural gifts but artificial enhancements, the result of surgical modifications to his developing brain. The files contain correspondence between Edmund and the research directors, discussing Marcus's progress and the success of the embedded subject protocol. Victoria's letters show her growing attachment to Marcus, her increasing reluctance to continue reporting on his development. Her maternal instincts had gradually overcome her scientific objectivity, leading to the emotional crisis that would eventually drive her to threaten exposure of the entire program. Marcus realizes that his flight from the house that night hadn't been driven by trauma alone. His enhanced consciousness had recognized the danger on a level deeper than normal human intuition. The modifications made to his brain had included survival instincts that activated when the laboratory conditions were compromised, driving him to escape when the controlled environment of his upbringing collapsed into chaos. The final document in the file is a current status report dated just 1 week ago. It reveals that Marcus has been monitored throughout his 30 years of homelessness, his location tracked through facial recognition systems, his behavior analyzed through remote observation. His return to the house hadn't been his own decision. It had been orchestrated through subtle psychological manipulation designed to bring him back when the researchers needed him for the next phase of their experiments. Marcus staggers away from the filing cabinet, his legs barely supporting him as the full weight of his manufactured existence crashes down on him. Everything he thought he knew about himself, his memories, his talents, his very identity, has been revealed as an elaborate construction designed by the monsters who created him. But as he struggles to process this revelation, a new sound penetrates the basement's mechanical drone. Footsteps on the stone stairs above. Someone is coming. After 30 years of abandonment, the basement is about to receive visitors, and Marcus realizes his return has triggered something he doesn't understand. He moves quickly toward the equipment storage area near the stairs, searching for anything that might serve as a weapon or tool. What he finds instead is a military ordnance case. Its olive-drab paint marked with warning symbols and inventory numbers from Edmund's collection. The case is locked, but not secured, suggesting it was meant to be accessed quickly in an emergency. Inside, Marcus discovers several blocks of military-grade explosive material, carefully wrapped and labeled with technical specifications. The charges are sophisticated, designed for controlled demolition rather than random destruction. Alongside the explosives, he finds detonators, timers, and detailed technical manuals that explain how to use the equipment safely. Edmund's handwritten notes, tucked into the case, reveal the purpose of these charges. Final contingency protocol, basement destruction sequence. If exposure imminent, eliminate all evidence. Charges strategically placed to collapse entire underground complex without damage to main structure. Activation requires dual authorization from research director and site supervisor. Marcus realizes that Edmund had planned for this possibility, that the basement could be completely destroyed if the experiments were ever discovered. The explosive charges are pre-positioned throughout the complex, hidden behind equipment panels and built into the structural supports. All that's needed is activation of the detonation sequence to erase decades of horror beneath the mansion. The technical manuals show that the explosion would be precisely controlled, designed to collapse the basement chambers while leaving the house above largely intact. The result would be a seemingly natural cave-in, attributable to foundation settling or groundwater erosion. Anyone investigating would find only collapsed stone and no evidence of the laboratory that existed here. But as Marcus studies the detonation procedures, he realizes there's no remote activation system. The charges must be triggered manually from within the basement, meaning whoever activates them won't survive the explosion. Edmund's contingency plan was essentially a suicide protocol, designed to eliminate evidence at the cost of whoever implemented it. The footsteps on the stairs grow closer, accompanied by voices that Marcus doesn't recognize. Multiple people are descending into the basement, their conversation clinical and businesslike. They're discussing specimen retrieval and consciousness transfer protocols, suggesting they've come for Sarah, Tommy, and the other subjects being kept alive in the darkness. Marcus examines the detonation device more closely, a simple but effective mechanism that would give him perhaps 2 minutes to activate the charges throughout the complex before the explosion. The manual warns that the blast will be powerful enough to kill anyone within the basement instantly, but also that it's the only way to ensure complete destruction of the experimental equipment and records. As he weighs his options, Marcus looks back toward the alcove where Sarah lies strapped to her table, still clutching her teddy bear. She has endured 30 years of horror, kept alive and aware through procedures that defy medical ethics. Tommy has suffered even longer, his consciousness enhanced to experience 47 years of torture with superhuman clarity. The other subjects documented in the files represent dozens of lives destroyed by the research conducted in these chambers. The voices grow closer, and Marcus realizes he has minutes at most before the researchers reach the main laboratory area. They've come to continue their work, to subject more people to the horrors he's discovered, to expand their experiments into new realms of human suffering. But they've also walked into Edmund's trap, gathering in the very location that can be erased from existence with the push of a button. The explosive charges represent both an ending and a beginning. Activated, they would destroy the evidence of decades of human experimentation, but they would also kill everyone currently in the basement, including the subjects who have suffered so much already. Marcus faces an impossible choice: allow the experiments to continue or end the suffering of everyone trapped in this underground hell, including himself. The voices in the stairwell become distinct as the group reaches the bottom of the basement. Marcus recognizes Senator Patterson's aged but still authoritative tone, along with voices he doesn't know discussing technical procedures with the detachment of career researchers. Hidden behind the equipment storage area, he watches as 4 figures enter the main laboratory space, their movements efficient and familiar with the layout. Patterson has aged into his 70s, but still carries himself with the bearing of a man accustomed to power. Beside him walks a woman in a white lab coat, whose clinical manner suggests she's taken over the medical aspects of the research. 2 younger men in dark suits follow, their alert postures marking them as security rather than scientists. As they move through the laboratory, the woman pulls out a tablet device and begins documenting something that chills Marcus to the bone. The screen displays what appears to be meeting minutes from a recent government session, marked with today's date and classified at the highest levels of security clearance. The document outlines plans for expanding the consciousness research program to new facilities across the country. The meeting minutes reveal that the basement laboratory has been designated as a legacy site scheduled for decommissioning, but not because the experiments are ending. Instead, the research has been so successful that it's being moved to larger, more sophisticated facilities, where the work can be expanded exponentially. The subjects currently held in the basement are to be transferred to these new locations for continued experimentation. Marcus reads over the woman's shoulder as she scrolls through the document, his blood freezing as he sees references to subject. S. Holloway's consciousness transfer success. Rate and enhanced neural capacity, suitable for large-scale replication. Sarah isn't just being moved, she's become the template for a new generation of experiments that will subject hundreds of people to the same horrors she's endured. The minutes detail plans for consciousness farming operations that would systematically kidnap and process victims on an industrial scale. The basement's crude equipment would be replaced by automated systems capable of handling dozens of subjects simultaneously. The government's investment in consciousness research has reached the point where they're planning to establish factory-like facilities for human experimentation. Patterson addresses the woman with casual familiarity that suggests years of collaboration. Dr. Marsh, how long do you need to prepare the subjects for transport? The new facility in Nevada is ready to receive them, and we have a window tonight when satellite surveillance will be down. Dr. Marsh consults her tablet before responding. Subject Holloway will require careful handling during transfer. Her consciousness integration is at 340% of baseline, which makes her extremely valuable but also fragile. Subject Richardson's modifications are more stable, but his neural degradation means we should prioritize tissue harvest over live transport. The clinical discussion of Sarah and Tommy as resources rather than people fills Marcus with rage. These researchers have been coming to the basement regularly, monitoring the subjects, planning their next moves with the same detachment they might use to discuss laboratory equipment. The suffering of the people trapped here is just data to them, valuable research that justifies any level of human cost. The meeting minutes on Dr. Marsh's tablet reveal the current scope of the conspiracy. Active facilities in 12 states, with plans for expansion to 24 locations within 5 years. Government funding channeled through defense contracts and medical research grants. University partnerships that provide academic cover for experiments that would be war crimes if conducted on enemy populations. Marcus realizes that destroying this basement won't end the horror, it will barely slow it down. The research has grown beyond the small group of conspirators who killed his family. It's become a government program with its own budget, personnel, and infrastructure. The consciousness enhancement experiments that began in this basement decades ago have evolved into a systematic program of human destruction that operates with official sanction. But the meeting minutes also reveal a crucial weakness in the conspiracy. The researchers have become complacent, confident that their work is protected by government authorization and public ignorance. They've documented everything, created paper trails that could expose the entire network if the right information reached the right people. Dr. Marsh's tablet contains not just the meeting minutes, but contact lists, facility locations, personnel records, and budget documents that could destroy the entire program if made public. The device represents decades of carefully guarded secrets, all stored in a format that could be transmitted worldwide within minutes if someone had access to it. As the researchers move toward Sarah's alcove to begin preparation for her transfer, Marcus realizes he faces a choice more complex than simply destroying the basement. He could eliminate this particular facility and everyone in it, or he could find a way to expose the entire network and end the suffering of victims in facilities across the country. Marcus moves silently through the shadows as the researchers prepare Sarah for transport, his enhanced consciousness allowing him to plan multiple contingencies simultaneously. The modifications made to his brain in childhood now serve him as he calculates distances, timing, and probabilities with mechanical precision. He reaches the explosives case and activates the detonation sequence, setting the timer for 15 minutes, enough time to complete what he must do. But before he can act further, he needs to ensure the truth survives even if he doesn't. Marcus pulls out a small digital camera he's carried in his backpack for 30 years, a cheap device he used to document his homeless existence. Working quickly and silently, he begins recording everything. The preserved organs floating in their chemical baths, the surgical equipment stained with decades of blood, the subjects still breathing on their examination tables. The camera becomes his final testimony, a digital record that will serve as irrefutable proof of the horrors conducted in this basement. He films Sarah's modified form, still clutching her teddy bear, documenting the extent of her surgical alterations, while her enhanced eyes track his movement with desperate intelligence. He records Tommy's grotesque modifications, the placard that documents 47 years of suffering, the life support equipment that has kept him conscious through decades of experimentation. Moving to the filing cabinets, Marcus films the most damning documents: his own birth certificate revealing his manufactured origins, the government correspondence authorizing human experimentation, the meeting minutes outlining plans for expanded facilities. Each document he captures on video represents evidence that could destroy careers and topple government officials if made public. But the camera's most important function becomes clear as Marcus begins speaking directly to the lens, creating a video confession that will tell the complete story of the Holloway basement. His enhanced memory allows him to recall details with perfect clarity, recounting 30 years of suppressed memories while documenting the evidence that supports every claim. My name is Marcus Holloway, and I am the product of human experimentation conducted by the United States government in collaboration with private researchers. The people you see in this video have been kept alive and conscious for decades, subjected to procedures that violate every principle of human rights and medical ethics. As he speaks, Marcus continues filming, creating a comprehensive record that connects the physical evidence to the broader conspiracy. He documents the consciousness enhancement equipment, explaining how it amplifies suffering rather than reducing it. He shows the preserved brains of his family members, still displaying neural activity after 30 years of separation from their bodies. The camera records his discovery of the government files, his reading of key passages that prove official knowledge and authorization of the experiments. Marcus films himself holding up classified documents that show the scope of the program, the planned expansion to industrial scales, The systematic harvesting of human consciousness for research purposes. The facility you see in this video is scheduled for closure, not because the experiments are ending, but because they're being moved to larger locations where the work can be expanded. The subjects here are to be transferred to new facilities where their suffering will continue indefinitely. Marcus sets up the camera on a tripod he constructs from laboratory equipment, positioning it to capture both himself and the researchers working in the background. As Patterson and Dr. Marsh prepare Sarah for transport, Marcus creates a real-time record of their clinical discussion about consciousness transfer protocols and tissue harvesting. The video captures Patterson's face clearly as he discusses government authorization for the research, Dr. Marsh's casual references to subject processing procedures, and the security personnel's preparations for transporting living victims to new facilities. Every word they speak becomes evidence of ongoing criminal conspiracy at the highest levels of government. In his final statement to the camera, Marcus explains his decision to activate the explosives, his choice to remain in the basement to ensure the subject's suffering ends, and his determination that the truth about the consciousness research program must reach the public. He provides specific instructions for transmitting the video to news organizations, human rights groups, and international investigators who might act on the evidence. The camera's memory card contains hours of documentation that could expose and destroy the entire network of facilities conducting human experimentation. But more importantly, it contains Marcus's personal testimony, the voice of someone who lived through the system's creation and witnessed its evolution into industrial-scale horror. As the timer on the explosives counts down to 12 minutes, Marcus prepares to upload the video content to multiple online platforms simultaneously, ensuring that even if the physical evidence is destroyed, the digital record will survive to bear witness to decades of government-sanctioned torture conducted. In the basement of his childhood home, Marcus uploads the video files through his smartphone's cellular connection, watching the progress bars creep toward completion as the explosive timer counts down to 8 minutes. Multiple news organizations, human rights groups, and international law enforcement agencies will receive the evidence simultaneously, ensuring that no single entity can suppress the information. But his most important upload target is a secure server that will automatically broadcast the content worldwide if he fails to check in within 24 hours. The researchers have noticed his presence now. Dr. Marsh spotted the camera tripod and alerted Patterson, who signals the security personnel to begin searching the basement. Marcus abandons stealth and moves directly toward Sarah's table, knowing he has minutes at most before they discover him. As he approaches his sister, Marcus speaks to her directly for the first time in 30 years. Her enhanced consciousness allows her to understand despite the breathing apparatus that prevents speech. "I'm here, Sarah. I'm going to end this. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what they did to you, to all of you." Sarah's eyes fill with tears, not of sadness, but of relief. Her enhanced neural capacity has kept her aware of every moment of suffering for 3 decades, but it has also preserved her memory of their childhood bond. She recognizes him not just as her brother, but as the one person who might finally end her nightmare. Marcus reaches into his jacket and withdraws something he's carried for 30 years without understanding why. A small voice recorder that was Sarah's Christmas gift to him in 1992. She'd given it to him so he could record architectural ideas when inspiration struck. But he had kept it close even during his years of homelessness. Some part of his enhanced consciousness recognizing its importance. The recorder still functions. Its battery powered by a small solar panel Marcus added years ago. He activates it and places it near Sarah's head, capturing her labored breathing and the mechanical sounds of the life support equipment. But more importantly, he begins to speak into it, creating an audio record that will survive even if the video upload fails. This is Marcus Holloway, speaking from the basement laboratory beneath my family's mansion. It's October 17th, 2025, and I'm recording this as my final testimony about 30 years of government-sponsored human experimentation. The person you hear breathing beside me is my sister Sarah, kept alive and conscious for 3 decades as a test subject for consciousness enhancement procedures. Patterson's voice echoes across the basement as he orders his security team to find the intruder. They're moving systematically through the complex, and Marcus knows they'll reach Sarah's alcove within minutes. The explosive timer shows 6 minutes remaining, enough time to complete his testimony, but not enough to escape. Marcus continues speaking into the recorder, his enhanced memory allowing him to recall specific dates, names, and procedures with perfect accuracy. He details the government officials involved, the funding mechanisms that supported the research, the network of facilities conducting similar experiments. The recorder captures every word with digital clarity, creating an audio record that will be impossible to dismiss as fabrication. The consciousness enhancement procedures don't reduce suffering, they amplify it. Every subject in this facility experiences pain and awareness far beyond normal human capacity. They remember every moment of torture with perfect clarity. This isn't medical research. It's systematic torture conducted with government authorization. The security team's flashlights begin to penetrate the alcove as Marcus reaches the climax of his testimony. He speaks directly to Sarah, his words intended for both the recorder and his sister's enhanced consciousness. "I'm sorry I ran that night. I'm sorry I left you here. But I'm not running anymore. The world is going to know what happened here." Sarah's eyes communicate forgiveness and understanding. Her enhanced neural capacity allows her to grasp not just his words, but his intentions. She knows the explosives are counting down, knows that her suffering will finally end, knows that the evidence will survive to expose the conspiracy that destroyed so many lives. With 3 minutes remaining on the timer, Marcus places the voice recorder in Sarah's modified hands, ensuring it will be found with her body when investigators eventually reach the blast site. The small device represents his final gift to his sister, not rescue, which is impossible after 30 years of modification, but justice and the promise that her sacrifice will save others from the same fate.